What's going on, everybody? I'm Jerry, and today I'm going to be going over my Week 9 power rankings. So, got some more content coming out this week as far as trades go at the trade deadline, so you're not going to want to miss that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends, tell your mother, tell your brother. All right, I want to get to 100 subscribers. We're at 54, so I'm a little over halfway there. So, help me out, and let's get right into the video. Starting off, we have a change at the 32 spot. Arizona Cardinals get bumped back a spot. Reasoning is they did put up a good fight um, against the Ravens, but I think the Panthers. I just feel like they deserve to move out of the 32 spot for once. And then the Cardinals, recency bias, have not played well the last couple weeks. Although, team like the Ravens is one of the top teams in the NFL, so you could understand why you wouldn't move them. But they also have the worst record in the NFL. That's part of the reason my power rankings videos, I try to keep it to, I use recency bias a little bit. It's not meant to just be a playoff predictor that goes season round. So I do factor that in with the Cardinals coming off a loss and offense looking kind of sloppy and Panthers getting a win. Cardinals move themselves back into the last spot in the league. Next, we have, though, the Carolina Panthers moving up one spot, their first time out of the 32nd spot in a while. They get a win over Houston, which, looking at the beginning of the year, you could have looked at the schedule and went, oh, maybe the Panthers get a win here. If Bryce Young is looking better than Stroud, and so far Stroud's been the better quarterback, but in this game, the Panthers defense had their number, so Panthers end up getting the win, and to me, they just had to move up a spot, especially being at 1-6, no longer defeated. Next, we have the Chicago Bears. I have them moving back a spot. Horrible loss over the Chargers. Offense, a lot of big mistakes by everywhere on the field. I thought the offensive line early on didn't look good. Kind of improved as the game went on, but the defense was horrendous. A lot of drops and mistakes from the wide receivers. Bajent with some inaccurate balls too. So all around, just had to move back a spot here. Couldn't put them behind the Panthers yet, just because I feel like we've seen at least more upside from the Bears, and Bears still are the worst 2-6 team in my opinion, which could be argued over the Giants here. You could argue that the Giants are worse. I just feel like the way they've stayed in games with the Bills, and then even with the Jets, their stats don't really show it, as you can see. 32 last in yards per game and points per game. But their defense has kind of been stepping up, and they've been in a lot of really low-scoring, close games. But Giants get another loss, so they have to move back a spot for me to 29. Next, we have the Patriots at 28. Bill Belichick isn't happy anymore after a loss. A closer game than you would expect against the Bills. 6-point difference, and it came down to a Hail Mary. Or I don't know if it was a Hail Mary, but it was a very close game to where Patriots had an opportunity to win it. Still one of the worst teams in the league. Can't forget about those back-to-back 30-point losses. So factoring all that in, and then the recency bias with this week against the Dolphins, you just take another loss. I believe it was 31-17 or so. So basically, the Patriots, they just belong to be back farther, unfortunately. And Bill Belichick is probably still looking at losing his job. I personally think it's early, but there's a lot of talk about it. Raiders go down to the Lions on Monday Night Football. I thought this game was closer than expected, and that's why I put it. I only have them moving back a spot because they only lost by the 12 points, and their offense did absolutely nothing. So it was really their defense that kept them in the game, forcing turnovers. So just felt right. Have to move back in a 12-point loss to the Lions, but we do talk about the Lions as being like a top 10 team this year, so have to factor that in. Raiders with the loss move back to the 27th spot. Broncos next up, I moved them up, one of the bigger movers moving forward this week. I just feel like you have to move them up, beating the Chiefs. They haven't really been consistent, but their offense has looked better and their defense has looked worse, which I don't think we really anticipated because they didn't lose too much on defense. and they didn't really gain much on offense either. Yet Russell Wilson really hasn't been playing horribly. They just haven't really been able to keep up with the other team in their losses. So Broncos getting a big win over the Chiefs, basically making fools out of the Chiefs too. You do have a flu game for Patrick Mahomes, but just makes sense to move the Broncos up here. I think in the most recent game, they looked a lot more complete against a top team in the NFL than the other teams that they just passed. So Commanders stay at 25 despite a loss to the Eagles. We look at the Eagles as one of the top teams in the league as well, and they were right in it. They tied against them last week. Their offense has been putting up points to where they're in games besides last week. So I feel like you have to give them credit there. Didn't feel right to move them back, and when you look at the teams that are around the Commanders, it didn't make sense to move them back either. You can see that defense, 31 in points per game and 29 in yards per game, is not great, but that's not expected to. Especially, I think we expected the defense to be playing better, but they also have gone up against some difficult teams too. So, and there's some inflated games like the Bears beating them 40-20. That really hurt their defensive averages. Again, I don't base my position ranking on the rankings on the side. It's just kind of another factor, a general term that you can kind of look at to help. But the Commanders stand still at 25, right ahead of the Green Bay Packers, who moved back a spot in another loss, a really bad loss to the Minnesota Vikings, where they're not really able to produce any offense. 67 yards in the first half. Did not play well whatsoever. And then, they started trying to do what they've been doing all year and come back in the second half. And they just couldn't do it against the Brian Flores-led defense of the Vikings. And Vikings defense has been looking really good. Unfortunately, Vikings lose Kirk Cousins, so I don't know how much that's going to be good for, especially assuming Flores is going to be looking for a head coaching job at the end of this year. But the Packers play another bad game. Could have moved him back a couple spots. I couldn't put the Commanders ahead of them yet because of how strong the season started for the Packers. So I think recency bias, you probably move them back behind the Commanders and maybe even the Raiders. But for right now, I just couldn't move it yet. So Packers end up moving back a spot to 24. Next, we have the Tennessee Titans, who get a big win over the Falcons and probably play their most complete game of the season. Their defense had already been playing pretty well, and Derrick Henry had been struggling a little bit. Obviously, he has his good weeks, but he did have some bad weeks, and this is a game where you have a big Derrick Henry rushing game. DeAndre Hopkins gets a bunch of yards and a couple touchdowns, and the defense still played well. And the Titans go on to win 28-23. You'd like to see the defense do a little bit better against Ritter, who hasn't been great. I guess they did do pretty well against Ritter, but Heineke came in and just kind of he made a comeback. I mean, it was a close game. He kept it close. So you'd like to see the Titans defense do a little bit better, but even just getting a win over the Falcons is pretty big for them. So we'll see what happens moving forward. They said Tannehill is the guy still, as long as he's not injured, but Will Levis sure did look good. So I think a lot of Titans fans are going to want to see more of him before they move back. But that does move the Titans up one spot to 23. Next, we have the Colts, who move back a spot and a tough loss. This is standard when you get a loss. You kind of have to move back. I think Gardner Minshew has looked okay. I still think that he could be, a top 32 quarterback in the league. I think he would make a team like the Falcons a little bit better. The Colts, I think this year they're at least, you could argue this is a hot take, but Anthony Richardson, I think it still was early. He was showing out early on, but the injury problems, I think it's better that Minshew's in, even if he were to be healthy. To me, it just makes sense. And that's what they were saying before the draft, is that Anthony Richardson should sit for a while and he needs to learn. So I think Minshew's been fine. Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor just go off in this game. The defense couldn't stop anything, resulting in the Colts moving to 32nd in points per game. So as long as your defense is doing that, you're not going to be able to move up that high. Offense kind of carrying them here, which is the reason that I was talking good about Minshew. I mean, 6th in points per game, 8th in yards per game. is damn good. So Colts move back a spot to 22. And the Vikings move up a spot, who get a win. I couldn't move them up very far because, one, they beat the Packers, and two, they just lost their starting quarterback beside me there, Kirk Cousins, for the season with an Achilles injury. So Vikings do move to 4-4, but season kind of seems like it's on a decline unless Jaron Hall can somehow show that he can be a great quarterback, which he's going to get an opportunity, which good for him. But it isn't looking good so far in the very small sample size that we've seen. You can argue with the offensive and defensive stats that I've shown, why do I have the Minnesota Vikings so low? It's really just because, again, most recent week they beat the Packers, so I don't think they get to move up that much. In prior weeks, the Vikings really haven't looked great. They've barely won games that should have been blowouts and lost games that they should have won. You can see their offense played really well in the beginning and actually has been consistently, a top half offense at least. And then the defense started coming through as of recently, especially playing some worse teams like the Bears and the Packers, both in their division. But the Vikings move up to 21, just the one spot, mainly losing Kirk Cousins. That's going to hurt them moving forward. Tampa Bay Buccaneers move back 3 spots to the 20th spot. I've been saying that they're overrated this whole time, and I still believe that. I don't think Baker Mayfield is a great quarterback, and they don't have a running offense at all. Rachaad White is useless. Leonard Fournette just signed with the Bills. I was asking him to be signed to the Buccaneers. He's been in the offense before, and although everybody just called him Playoff Lenny, I feel like he would at least get more production than Rachaad White, or take part of the load off of Rachaad White. I don't know if Rachaad White would be able to do like a Tony Pollard role where he just kind of comes in and then plays well then. Would have been something nice to see, but the Bills end up getting Fournette. And the Buccaneers lose again and move back to 23 spots. One of the bigger losers, but the biggest loser, the Houston Texans, mainly just I didn't move them back much last week. And I felt this week losing to the worst team in the league, or second to worst according to my power rankings, and having 2 back-to-back not good weeks. Feel like they had to move back more. You'll see some of the other teams that vaulted them in recent weeks have just looked better. So the Texans moved back to 19, which I still think is above what we thought. There was people saying that before the season started, everyone was saying the Cardinals and the Texans, which Cardinals have the Texans' first pick, were going to be 1 and 2. And so far, the Cardinals pick is bad, but from the Texans, I mean, they're playing, I think, above what we expected. So I think 19 even still could be high, projecting out to the future, but it feels like the right spot right now. Again, DeMeco Ryans and that defense has been playing well. This was a game where, offense only puts up 13 points. What do you expect the defense to do? So Texans move back 5 whole spots to 19. Again, just where I believe they go. Jets move up a spot, beating the Giants. Again, not a huge win because the Giants aren't great, but they've been in a lot of close games with teams, like the Bills. And then they had the Commanders game. That was a close game too. That doesn't really help their case. But Jets win. I just feel like they have to move up when they get the win here. And then vaulting over, some of those other teams, you could arguably put the Texans ahead. It's just with the 2 losses recently and the Jets kind of starting to pick up a little bit, especially their defense playing well and Zach Wilson getting at least a little bit more comfortable with the offense. Just feel like they're meant to be at 18, moving up 1 spot from last week. Chargers, pretty big vault here, moving up 3 spots. Really only because they only beat the Bears. One of the worst teams in the NFL right now. They did blow them out and they kind of dominated, but it's really just been their offense. Their defense played a better game, but they're playing against a rookie undrafted free agent that went to D2. So not much to say there. I couldn't move them up any higher. Again, looking at the teams around them, they just haven't proved anything to me yet. Chargers are one of those teams where they're starting off really slow, but by the end of the year, we could be talking about them in the playoff competition. And basically every year, it seems like they end up being around the 14, 15, 16 region. So I have them moving up to 17. If they can string together some wins and start looking like a playoff team, then I could potentially see I could see them, moving up on my list, but for right now, they just stick at 17, which is good still, moving up 3 spots. Falcons move back a spot, losing to the Titans, who before this week haven't been great. They went up against Will Levis, who is a rookie quarterback that I don't think anybody was expecting much from. And sure, you have to worry about planning for him, and I don't know if they were planning for him, and there's not really any NFL tape to watch. And they just kind of got exposed downfield. I think Levis maybe thought that they were going to, keep the teams outside might think that the playbook might not be opened up very much. And Falcons were guarding the short stuff, and just D-Hop kept burning them deep one-on-one coverage. So Falcons, who have their defense has kind of been the strong suit. Their offense really hasn't played that well. Haven't been able to get in the end zone. You see 14th in yards per game, 28th in points per game. They've been able to get down the field. They just don't score touchdowns. So in a loss to the Titans, have to move back a spot. Still in the top half of the NFL, but just barely. Saints move up a spot. I just feel like at this point I can confirm that they're better than the Falcons. Saints defense has also been very good, as you see there. 9th in points per game, 5th in yards per game. And then their offense has been doing well. They were the league leader in offensive yards this week and played a good game, put up a lot of points. Derek Carr still has his issues, but Kamara has been looking good, and so has Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill's been a big factor in these past 2 weeks. So to me, the Saints have to move up. Having that 4-4 record too, being right at the middle of the pack, 4-4, makes a lot of sense. They move up the 1 spot to 15. Next, we have the Rams at 14, who move back another spot. Kind of crazy to say at 3-5. I think it's because of you have to look at the teams that they've played. They played it against a lot of talented teams, and yes, they did get smoked by the Cowboys. I just couldn't vault them ahead of the Saints yet. The Saints haven't really been very consistently good, and you could say the same thing about the Rams. Making a lot of mistakes, and the defense letting up so many points in this game, like. You have to factor all that in. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua that are shown the side of me there got locked up pretty well in this game too. So factoring all that in, I was tempted to move them back farther. I still feel like the Rams could be a playoff team, and I feel like they have a lot of talent. So I only move them back to 1 spot. If they start stringing together a couple losses and 2 or 3 ugly games, which again last week wasn't great either. I feel like I've seen enough from them to not move them past the Saints and the Falcons. So Rams stay there at 14, despite the 3-5 record, moving back. Pittsburgh Steelers, who are our biggest mover by a landslide last week, moved back a spot in a loss to the Jaguars. Fairly close game. Your quarterback goes out. I don't think it really would have changed much. Kenny Pickett hasn't looked great this year. They have no run offense whatsoever. I even am looking at this thinking 13 is kind of high for a team who's 29th in points per game, 30th in yards per game, and then, you can see the defense too. Really haven't been great. They've just been able to win, so that's what's kind of kept them in the top half. Look like they could be a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to do anything. If they make it into the playoffs, it's strictly because of the typical Mike Tomlin has a winning record, can't do it in the playoffs. And I worry that I don't think the Steelers can even string together enough solid games. Like you'd think for playoffs, you just need to put 4 games together, and as long as some team does that, they can win a Super Bowl, kind of like the Giants have done a few times in a long time ago, and their lower seed end up winning the Super Bowl, beating Brady. But the Steelers, even in the regular season, I feel like can't string together 4 solid wins. So because in a row, so Steelers end up moving back a spot to 13, despite their horrible points per game and yards per game on the offensive and defensive side. This time, we have the biggest mover of the week here. Cincinnati Bengals, big win over the 49ers. I feel like it would be wrong not to move them up. They had a really rough start to the season, keeping them around the 20 mark, and then they get a win last week. They get a win this week, or 2 weeks ago and last week. And it just, they got to keep vaulting up. They're still a great football team. Their defense was creating a lot of pressure. Obviously, Trent Williams was out, so you assume that that's part of the reason. But defense was getting good pressure. Joe Burrow was making a lot of great decisions. Jamar Chase went off again. They finally gave Joe Mixon the ball a decent amount of times, and he was productive with it. So a lot of positives there for the Bengals, playing against an injured 49ers team, but still the 49ers. They have been struggling, but it seemed wrong to have the Bengals not in the top half. And looking at some of the teams that I just compared them to, I feel like they had to vault those past teams. The Steelers, Rams, who just in recent weeks haven't really looked great. So Bengals move up 6 whole spots to 12. At 11, the Browns, one of the biggest movers backwards next to the Texans there. I moved them back 4 spots because I feel like these last 3 weeks have just been very close games. P.J. Walker squeaks by with a win. Sure, they've played against some tougher opponents, but I feel like I've been wanting to move them back, but felt wrong about it because of the wins that they were getting. So it didn't seem right to move a team back multiple spots after a win. So it's kind of inflated here. Browns move back 4 spots. Some people could argue still a little high, 11th with the situation that they're in, but it's really their defense. Their defense has been absolutely dominant, and obviously not in this game. This game was kind of the outlier. But their defense has been phenomenal. Their offense was at least showing something, even though the defense was really winning in the games. But again, they just moved back to 4 spots because it's kind of inflated after having 2 close wins in games they probably should have lost. And PJ Walker plays horrible. So Browns move back 4 spots to 11 at 4-3. Seattle Seahawks 5-2. Great week again for the Seahawks, taking down the Browns. Closer, pretty close game on this one. I almost got my predictions exactly right. I predicted 24-21 Seahawks, Browns to cover, and the Browns end up getting 20 and just barely not covering the 3.5 point spread. But Seahawks have looked really good. They've looked like a top 10 team in the NFL. I feel like they're worthy of at least the 10 spot. You see 11th and 16th in offense and defense yards per game, putting them kind of right around that region. Been kind of complete. They just traded for Leonard Williams, so I think that helps. And they get the win over the Browns, so it only seems right that they just move one over the Browns, especially, Browns struggling with injuries. But that does affect their ranking. So Seahawks move up a spot to 10 at 5-2, the lowest 5-2 team, with the Bills still being ahead of them. I just can't count the Bills out yet. They get a win this week, big win, not a massive win or anything, but big win for them with the losses recently. So that they had to move up, getting the win, in my opinion. Their offense still looks good. Josh Allen still plays some sloppy football. It just seems like that's what's going to be moving forward. And really what the Bills need is the defense to just step it up. The past few weeks, defense has been horrible. So defense steps it up more this week. Josh Allen still makes, a couple mistakes as usual, but the Bills end up getting the win and just move up 1 spot for me. Couldn't really move them up much farther, especially with the Lions. Didn't move the Lions, although they got a win. Again, it was a win over the Raiders, which didn't really impress me much, and I thought the game was too close for comfort, so there was no good reason that I could move them up past this next team. And Lions just stay where they're at 8. Despite being 6-2, lowest 6-2 team that I have. Cowboys were the ones that vault over them from 9-7 this week, mainly because they beat the Rams, who have been a good football team so far, and they kind of dominated the Rams the whole game. It was never close, 33-3 at halftime, and then final score was 43-20. So not really ever close. The defense is looking top tier, despite Trevon Diggs being out. Actually, in recent news, Jalen Johnson just requested a trade, and there was rumors that he could go to the Cowboys. I think it'd be a great spot for him if he, if he wants to chase a ring. I think the Cowboys are kind of overrated because I don't think their offense is very good, despite being second in points per game. It's really all being set up by the defense. So, and defensive touchdowns as well, and safeties and stuff. So I don't really, for the Cowboys, it almost can't be an offensive stat. If I looked it up, I think their offensive rank would probably be significantly lower, like barely make 10, just because of how well the defense has been playing. But Cowboys end up at 7, moving up 2 spots. They vault over the Lions just in a big win over the Rams. The Lions, in my opinion, just barely win. It was a 12-point victory, but didn't win by as much as they should have against the Raiders and made some mistakes. So the Lions can't move up. Cowboys do move up 2 spots to 7. Jaguars I keep right where they're at 6. I couldn't see them passing these top 5 teams that we're going to be looking at in a second. They have looked good, but they've been kind of close. You look at their rankings. All of their rankings are below 10, so I look at that and I go, should they really be 6? But they also find ways to win games. Travis Etienne's looked really good. Trevor Lawrence has been able to spread the ball around to Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram even having some big weeks. And then their defense has been playing above average, only allowing 10th in points per game too. So when you have 10 and 10, I think it's worthy of being much higher than that's represented. Points per game to me being one of the more important stats because you win and lose by scoring points and not scoring points. So Jaguars stay where they're at 6. Again, they get a win over the Steelers. I just don't think that they won by enough for me to move them more ahead. And you look at some of the other teams, I just can't count them out yet. We'll talk about one of those teams being the San Francisco 49ers at 5. They moved back 2 spots. Again, I just couldn't put the Jaguars past the Niners yet. Sure, they have the 3 straight losses, but they've had the injuries, and the team, I'm still remembering this dominating offense. And there was a time earlier, I'm a Bears fan, and when I was watching the 49ers, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to be a 49ers fan this year because the Bears suck to watch. And as soon as I said that, the 49ers lose 3 straight games. I did not end up choosing that. I think the excitement of Tyson Bagent coming in for the Bears is I wanted to see him earlier in the season. I think at least just see him play, not make him the starting quarterback, just see what he could do. Fields was struggling, but I said I wanted to be a 49ers fan, and then Bagent came in, and I was like, you know what? I like watching this Bagent guy. Let's forget about the 49ers, and then they lose 3 straight games. So I think they'll bounce back. I still think they're a top 5 team in the NFL, even if their record doesn't reflect it. You definitely can't move them out of the top 10. And if Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel come back and then they still are losing and not looking good and Brock Purdy's falling off, people are getting more tape on him and figuring him out, then 49ers are really going to start moving back. But I couldn't move them out of the top 5 yet, so they moved to 5 from 3. Right behind the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a bad loss. We're number 1 last week. Just got murdered by the Broncos, which should not be happening. Played a close game against the Broncos in their first matchup. But with how much they got blown out, we know Mahomes got injured, but it really shows the weaknesses of the other team. Defense on the field a lot in this game, and the defense has been good, but wasn't able to score with the 5 turnovers that the Chiefs offense had. It's tough to win a game when the defense, they just play a long drive where maybe they stop them and then they're finally off the field, they can get a breather, and then Mahomes throws an interception or somebody fumbles, or so made it difficult for a strong defense, and Chiefs offense just not being able to put up points really hurt them. So I had to move them back 4, especially with how the record is and with how good some of these other top teams have been doing. Chiefs felt like the right place for them. One of those top teams being the Ravens, who have looked like one of the more complete teams in the NFL. When you talk about complete teams all around, you'd look at the 49ers, who have been struggling recently. You'd look at the Chiefs, who struggled this past week, but their defense has been good. But they've shown, without Kelsey or without Chris Jones or with an unhealthy Patrick Mahomes, they can lose a game. So that's where both of their losses are. And with how important those pieces are, I feel like it's good to note that that they can lose, and that's kind of why they move back a little bit more for me. Whereas the Ravens every week have been good. Lamar actually did not throw the ball well this week, but against a bad Cardinals team. Cardinals hung in it better than I anticipated, but the Ravens still end up winning, and I felt like they were worthy with their consistency. I mean, you look at their defense has been great, and their offense has shined in these past couple weeks. As far as all-around numbers, with the 7, 11, 1, and 2, it doesn't really get much better than the Ravens, except for these 2 teams coming up. Second place being the Miami Dolphins. I guess you could argue that they are not better because they're just first in everything on offense, and then their defense has been playing better in recent weeks, but still not great. 25th in points per game. They just basically outscore opponents. But with that 6-2 record, I was tempted to put the Ravens ahead of them because, again, I think they've been a little bit more complete. I just don't think their win over the Cardinals was that impressive, so I couldn't put them over there yet. And they've had some tough games as well. So Dolphins move up to 2. I had them ahead of the Ravens in the prior week, and Ravens. I'm almost talking myself out of it where I'd put the Ravens at 2. I'm just going to leave them at 3. I think the Ravens could vault over the Dolphins, even if both teams get a win, but the Dolphins get a close win and a high scoring shootout, and the Ravens just dominate a team or beat a good team. I think they could vault over them, but the Dolphins end up at 2, still being that top offense pretty much all season. But then number 1, Philadelphia Eagles, third in both statistics on offense. 19th in points per game is bad. Their defense really has not been good this year. They've dealt with some injuries. They got Kevin Byard, so we'll see when that starts kind of coming into fruition. But basically, Eagles have the best record. They have found ways to win games, albeit with the refs kind of having an effect on some of those games. I don't know if it would have fully changed the outcome of any of those games, but I think that's definitely helped with them moving up to this 1 spot here. And again, as I talk about it, I'm kind of feeling like the Ravens are probably 2, but even if you looked at the Ravens at 2, I think the Eagles are still better than the Ravens at this point. And I think the Eagles are more well-rounded than the Dolphins with how well their offense has been playing. And although their defense has been bad, it hasn't been as bad as the Dolphins. So the Philadelphia Eagles end up taking the 1 spot. And then we'll go over all the teams here. And just so you can see the whole board and see those biggest movers as I skip to the thumbnail. So yeah, we got biggest movers again. Biggest loser is the Texans with the Chiefs and the Browns coming in close there. And then you got the biggest movers forward was the Bengals. And we have a mistake. I've made another mistake. I'm not perfect, believe it or not. But the 49ers did not move back. They did not move up 3 spots. I reused the graphic and just moved the teams around, and I forgot to switch the 49ers, as well as the Ravens moved up 2 spots. I apologize. Most of it's correct. So that's a shame. I make mistakes. I work like 50 hours a week, and then I'm trying to do this. I'd like to get the I love talking about football, so I will make some mistakes. I am a human being. I apologize. But we have, again, biggest mover, Bengals, phenomenal week, beating the 49ers, who did move back 2 spots to the 5th spot. See Cowboys vault the Lions. Texans move back to where I think they should be. Buccaneers, I finally feel like I can honestly move back in the rankings, who I've thought have been lower, just had like a better record. So that's kind of where that is. And then the Broncos, big week, beating the Chiefs. Moving up the 4 spots as well. Could make an argument that I'm looking at it here, could make an argument for the Giants being a little bit higher, just because I feel like the Giants have been in a lot of close games they should have won. But I think everything's pretty accurate here. If there's anything that you disagree with, comment down below. And then thank you for watching, and have a great day.